Hi, Rob.
How you doing?
Hey, good
We've
to see you.
talked before, but first time meeting in
we've
person.
done this before.
Yeah.
Hi, my name is Jp Cortez. I'm the executive director of the Sound Money Defense League. We are a national public policy group. We go state to state and in DC, working to remove the friction around gold and silver as money. So in several states here in the United States today, you can't buy gold or silver, bars, rounds, coins, without getting hit with a sales tax. In the majority of states, when you sell that same bar, round, or coin, you're going to get hit with a capital gains tax. So to be sure, the gold standard did not die. The gold standard did not fail. It was killed by politicians. It was killed by dishonest politicians. And dishonest politicians don't like honest money. So gold and silver today are unworkable as money. And we go state to state, and again, some federal legislation to remove that friction and to allow gold, silver, in some cases Bitcoin, we've got Bitcoin legislation as well, to allow these things to be used not just as saving vehicles, not just as hedges for inflation, but also as money. So that's kind of my background. I've been doing this now for 8 years, since 2015. This year in 2023, I'm happy to say we introduced legislation in 25 states in the United States to end the sales tax and the capital gains tax, establish in-state depositories, bolster pension funds with gold and silver, allow the state treasurer to invest state funds in gold and silver if they like. So the growth has been enormous. Sound money has had an awakening. And I think it's not, on the policy side, it's obviously very important, but the work you're doing, spreading the message, going on YouTube, going online, that, when we started this, it was me with a laptop, running around to state legislatures, asking, begging people to introduce legislation like this.
That's how it always starts, by the way.
And it's
It
not
starts
like that
grassroots
anymore.
level.
Right.
Yeah.
It's not like that anymore. My inbox is filled with state legislators and federal legislators, elected congresspeople, asking to introduce legislation to restore sound money on the state and federal level. So I think the growth has been enormous, right? And I'm sure you've seen that too with your channel, with all the work you've been doing. I think sound money in 2023, at least, as far as policy goes, it has won.
Yeah, I agree with that. And I also do work for a sister organization called Citizens for Sound Money. And Citizens for Sound Money, much like JP's organization, also started from a single person with a laptop who had been a senator in New Hampshire and had a couple of business partners, and they were looking at sound money. He was part of Ron Paul's campaign there in New Hampshire as well. And they had a concern that what was going on with the dollar, what was going on with the economic situation. So what we do with Citizens for Sound Money is we do something similar to what you do, and we work together, by the way, both organizations do, in which we go and promote. We lobby, we try to gain support of people in different states for sound money. So one of the things that Citizens for Sound Money has done is we've gone to Florida and we've spoken with the Florida's governor's cabinet, for example. We've gone to New Hampshire and South Carolina. I live in Texas, so we'll be going to Texas. If there's a special legislative session this year, we'll all be involved in Texas. If not, we'll do it in 2025.
And Texas is a hot spot. There were several sound money bills that were introduced in Texas that would completely change the way money and banking happens here in the United States.
Yeah, and one of the things that we do is we are trying to reconfirm Article 1, Section 10 of the Constitution as far as gold and silver goes as money, but also trying to add into that and we've received very positive reviews on this so far, a blockchain component to it so that real gold and silver is backing a blockchain token so that people can trade in tokens, because we realize this is, 2023, and it's hard to carry around gold and silver and actually transact business, and it's hard to wire gold. I mean, how do you wire gold and silver? So the blockchain would just be the transmission mechanism for gold and silver that's stored in a state-approved depository. It's audited, all of those kind of things. So we're going beyond not just trying to reaffirm gold as money and silver as money, but we're also trying to improve the transmission mechanism, because I think in addition to the fiat dollar being an issue, the banking system is an issue because they have a stranglehold on how you transfer money. So it goes back to my religion. I'm a Christian. Jesus throughout the money changers. Why? Because they control the transmission and flow of money. And so it's not only is gold and silver money, but how do you transmit it, and is that free as well? So that's one of the things that we're working on with our legislation as well.
Yeah, and I think that in and of itself hits on a really important point. because sound money is honest money. It's God's money. And I think sound money has two primary value propositions, and they're pretty easy to understand. The first is that sound money promotes investment in the future. Your ability to make investments that last decades, centuries, is incredibly important, and the accumulation of savings and how societies grow, that is contingent. It is a necessary component of a prosperous society. The second value prop of sound money is that it acts as a bulwark, a safety, a defense, a prophylactic against a government that would otherwise spend, conduct illegal, unconstitutional wars overseas, spend domestic money in ways that we never thought possible. In a post-COVID era, we're living in a time where, the entire system is built on the government having this printer. Mm-hmm. And without that monopoly on money, how much freer could we be? And this speaks to, I think, the importance of sound money. And Mises himself wrote this for the Austrian fans out there. Mises wrote that a gold standard is incredibly important. And without a gold standard, it renders all of the other constitutional protections worthless. Listed among freedom of speech, listed among right to bear arms, should be a standard of money that protects the purchasing power of people who work their asses off and can no longer afford housing and food and medicine. What's happening?
Yeah, I think if you go back to the Federalist Papers, what the Founding Fathers realized and the people that supported them realized was you had to have freedom of access to land, the ability to create something from the land. You had to have freedom of access to money, and you had the freedom to defend that. And when you don't have all of those things, it's kind of a three-legged stool, then you start to have problems. And I think if you look at the political situation going on, not only from a foreign policy perspective, but also what's going on within our own country, you see a lot of those freedoms, people are attacking those. Why are they attacking them? Because they know they have to control. If they can't control it, then freedom and honesty is going to come back to the country, and it's going to basically screw a lot of vested interests. So there are a lot of vested interests fighting against these principles. But we need to reestablish these, because if we don't reestablish these, my concern is my children are not going to grow up in a free world. And so people ask me, why did I do YouTube? I'm a very private person, generally introverted by nature. But the reason I do what I do and throw myself out there all the time is because I realize I have to help build that world for my kids, because if I don't, who's going to do it? Right, so I used to be you sitting out there. I'm just now me sitting up here. But like I said at the very introduction, I'm no different than you. The only difference is I just have a passion for this. I have a passion for creating freedom and bringing freedom to the world. Because I believe that, the younger generations are beautiful. I think they're creating beautiful things, and I'd like to have a world in which they can live, and we can see that beauty come out of it.
Yeah, and I think that especially hits home for me as a younger person. I'm 30 years, recently turned 30. I have very little prospect of owning a home as a single male. My peers are struggling. Just speaking specifically about my circle, I have friends with public school teachers who are leaving in droves because they are unable to function and survive. So beyond the piss poor pay, you also have to deal with all of the incredible, both in testing and all of that, and then having to deal with students that are largely, or in many cases, difficult. And so, it speaks to a fiat. It's not, the fiat money is what we're talking about here, but it's more than that. The fiat money has corrupted everything, right? So from when you have this easy credit system, when you have a system that's self-validating and it creates a lack of accountability, it creates a lack of responsibility, and so here we are. And so 30 trillions in debt, right?
Over 30 trillion. I think it's 34 or 35 now. Yeah.
And so we're now looking around, and people in the state legislators themselves are starting to ask themselves questions. There are almost 9,000 elected state legislators in the United States. Mm-hmm. How many of them do you think have ever heard the term sound money?
A minority, for sure.
A massive minority. Mm-hmm. How many of them have ever asked themselves questions about What is money? Where does money derive its value from? Why are we using money? These are questions that have not been asked in American politics since at least 1971, when Nixon closed the gold window officially. And we're waking up to a time now where if you remove the restrictions, if you remove all the friction, the taxes, the regulations around using gold and silver and Bitcoin as money, we can see, as Hayek talked about, denationalization of currency and a competition in currency. There's no reason, so the dollar, there's a monopoly on money. The US government has, the US Federal Reserve note, I should say, it's no longer a dollar. The dollar used to be an equivalent amount of silver ounces. That is no longer the case. The US Federal Reserve note is an IOU. So with that IOU in mind, so with that in mind, with the understanding that the dollar is no longer a final extinguisher of debt, right? So now we're left with how can we fix this? And I think, so what we do on the policy side is largely to remove all of the friction around using gold and silver as money. I personally don't believe I'm smart enough to make money. I want to leave that to people much smarter than myself. But removing all of the entanglements, the encumbrances, the regulations around things used as money is incredibly important. And I think that's why, you know, your YouTube channel, we're talking not necessarily about storing these things away, and while that is important, we're also talking about, wait, why do we use the Federal Reserve note at all? Why aren't we using better things as money? You know, the free market is good at deciding what the best shoelaces are, the best lima beans, the best cars, the best pants. Why don't we do that same thing with money?
Right. Democratize it. Allow the people to choose, you know, whether we're going to be using blockchain, Bitcoin, or they're going to go back to gold and silver. It needs to be a choice of the people. I feel as though the Federal Reserve and the banking system has corrupted the monetary supply, and then what comes after that is culture and politics as well. I think it's very easy to see where we are as a nation.
Downstream.
With all of those things. And so I believe that we have to get honest money in so that we can have an honest society. But we need we need the people to decide what that is. I ultimately think you guys are going to be the ones to decide what that should be. And we just want to bring that choice back, essentially, is what we're doing on the legislative side. And on the YouTube channel and Twitter and all that stuff that I do, it's really just to kind of bring that message to people. And it's been really interesting the last 3 or 4 years I've been doing this to see all of the support that I've gotten, people coming to this for the first time, much like I did. Mr. J. Edward Griffin was sitting over here, and I got an introduction to him a few minutes ago, first time I'd ever met him. And I told him, I said, Creature from Jekyll Island is what got me started on this journey. And I said, thank you so much, Mr. Griffin, for doing that. I mean, you changed my life forever when I read that book. And so I'm trying to help the next generation. I'm trying to be that conduit for other people using social media, because social media really is the way that it's an easy way, you know, that you can reach out to people. And so I'm just very thankful to be able to do that, and that's what led me into, you know, working with your organization, working with Citizens for Sound Money, and trying to reestablish, you know, honest and sound money, but letting the market determine what that is. I don't think the banks and the Congress needs to determine that. If you look at the Constitution, originally, the Federal Reserve is unconstitutional as far as I'm concerned. It never should have been put in place, and I think a lot of the laws around regulation of our economy as well are unconstitutional. So I think if we go back to the system we had before, it not being a perfect system, maybe we can improve it here and there. But I think if we go back to the system we had before, we're going to have better honest commerce. We're going to have better people able to store their labor in, whether it be gold and silver or something else, and be able to raise those families. My kids right now, my daughter still lives at home with us. She just turned 20 years old. She was an actress before the strikes. She didn't work for about a year, and she struggled. She spent all the money she had saved. And I taught her to save some in gold and silver, and I said, don't ever spend that. I'll help you buy things with your fiat, but don't spend your gold and silver. But she just recently got, you know, another job due to some of those, you know, labor strikes. But it's very hard for young people. It's very hard for young people to make a life now. I was speaking with someone in my community who's older than I am. He's way past retirement, but he still works. He's like, work is what keeps me alive. And he said, you know, back in my day, Robert, in the 30s, 40s, and 50s, you know, after the war and everything, you could not help but find opportunity. If you worked hard, you were going to have a successful life. There was abundant opportunity. I don't think we can all sit here and say that's the same case right now. It's just not for the younger generations, and it's not really fair to them. And so that, you know, that's a lot of my motivation for doing this.
Yeah, and it's undeniable, right? Largely the mood among people my age and younger is one of despair. There's very little hope moving forward. You know, between student loans, between the largely escaped idea of owning a home, between debt, medical bills, there's very little hope for the future. And now we're seeing things, and we're seeing, like you were mentioning, we're seeing how broken money not only affects the financial side of the world, but it flows downstream from culture. And so now we're seeing things like quiet quitting that are popular, for example. We're seeing, you know, people having no prospect of paying their debt.
Well, we're seeing riots across countries now.
Of course.
I just did a series of videos where kids in California were beating each other up, and this is not in a this is not in the ghetto. This is in a middle class community in which kids were attacking each other and attacking stores, because I feel as though they have all this pent up, like you said, despair and frustration, that it's coming out and it's starting to corrupt our culture, starting to corrupt our kids, and it's very dangerous.
And how could it not? How could it not? You look around and you see these bailouts happening, right? And so this speaks to, like, okay, so the concept that the rich are getting richer and that the wealth, I don't think that's necessarily true, right? Because the rich are getting richer, certainly, but the middle class is growing as well. Maybe not wage growth to match inflation, but these two things are rising in tandem. Everyone, in most cases, everyone, quote unquote, is getting richer. But now, so you're telling me I have to earn 9%, 7% on my money in order to make a return, just to make up for what the federal government printing all of this money is eating up on my gains? It's impossible to keep up. And that's the official government statistics. Those 7% is an official number. If we look at shadow stats, if we look at the people that are actually putting inflation statistics together that are not these cockamamie cooked statistics that the government uses to measure inflation, if we look at actual numbers, yeah, there's reason to be upset. I understand it too. And like the despair it's you can feel it, it's tangible, it's in the air. And people, they're looking for solutions, and I think many of them are looking to government, right? And so I think, my outlook on the future, if I'm being honest, is one that will probably get worse before it gets better. But when it does get better, when people start just asking questions about spending money, wait, how is it that in a stimulus package, I got $14,000, but 100 million, billions of dollars have gone to Ukraine? How is this happening? How are the pharmaceutical companies getting so many dollars and not? How is it possible that we printed trillions of dollars out of thin air and I got $1,400? It is absurd. It doesn't make sense, and people are waking up to the realization that, wait, maybe something's wrong with the money.
Yeah, something's wrong with the money, and a couple of statistics I wanted to throw out there. I just saw a graphic from J.P. Morgan which says all the excess savings we had accumulated prior to the pandemic are now gone, and so there's nothing. People are completely...
And credit card debt is way up.
Credit card debt has been accelerating. People are completely and utterly broke. There is nothing left. And I wanted to make a comment on Gresham's Law. The previous speaker is speaking about that. I think we're seeing the death of the bad money. I think that is coming very much quickly, and that's why what we're doing is try to make sure we're trying to front run. He was talking about front running. We're trying to front run and make sure that there are provisions on the books to allow good money to come back in, because eventually it's going to want to make its way there. Now, I think the market eventually is going to win anyway. I think people are going to force it in, but we have to be careful. We have to be careful that, if you look at previous currency collapses, sometimes bad stuff happens before the good stuff happens, and I think that's what we're trying to avoid. We're trying to kind of skip over the bad stuff. Maybe we can go straight to the good stuff.
And there are plenty of historical examples where this is the case. I don't know if you've read When Money Dies. It's a book by Adam Ferguson. It's an incredible account of the Weimar Republic and the eventual collapse of the German mark. And you read this book, and it's chilling. It brings, this book is saying things like, the currency started to collapse, but politicians started to do things like blame farmers, or they were blaming labor unions, or they were scapegoating these other parties so as not to attract attention to the fact that they had printed so many of these and the value of it was collapsing. And you see it today in the United States. This is not a foreign thing. This is not something that happened 1,000 years ago. It's happening currently. We're living through it. That's right. And so innovation in this market, innovation in the form of, for example, things like Goldbacks, I believe you're associated with them, things like asset-backed digital currencies, things like Bitcoin. The innovation in this market is ultimately, I think, what's going to pull us out of a monetary system that is spiraling, a moribund dollar that doesn't have that much longer. And we've seen it 1,000 times. The dollar.
It's the Matrix. How many times have we been through the Matrix?
Exactly.
Everybody's watched those movies.
We're just repeating history at this point. Currencies die all the time. And so 200 years ago, the U.S. dollar, the U.S. Federal Reserve note, wasn't the global reserve currency. And 200 years from now, it won't be either. So what's next? Right? And that's the innovation. That's what we're excited about. That's what we're getting, writing policy and passing policy to get people the hell out of the way, to get the government the hell out of the way, let the market figure money out.
Yeah, and coming to these conferences, the one reason I love this conference, and I love the fact that we're talking about sound money in many different ways, we're talking about all aspects of it, and just to see all of the people here. I mean, this is just awesome how many people are concerned about this. Real quick question for you guys. Raise your hand. How many of you do not live in Las Vegas? Yeah, that's the majority. You guys flew or you drove in. So congratulations to you because you believe in freedom. So I don't know, did you want to take a moment to ask or let people ask a few questions? Yeah. Anybody want to ask any questions? Sorry, I forgot my algebra.
Rob, please, go ahead and pick someone.
This guy right here in front, in the black.
Is this kind of ironic? Sorry. Is this kind of ironic that we're in Caesar's Palace and we're talking about kind of like the fall
yeah, it's very ironic. The fall of Rome. The fall of Rome, I had my social media person that does on my social media. It's like men right now that follow you are just obsessed with Roman mythology. They're obsessed with Roman everything. And I think it's because we might be living through that time.
So this is a thing on any social media followers. This is a thing, right? How often do men think about the Roman Empire? And so people have asked me recently, hey, JP, how often do you think about the Roman Empire? I think about it all the time. This is one of the prime examples of a flourishing empire who messed their currency up so bad that it collapsed in and of itself.
Yeah.
I think about it all the time. We're not that far away from this. And so it's important to think about. We're seeing examples of this live out every single day. We're seeing it's not even that far away. Argentinian money, Zimbabwean money. This happens literally all the time. The U.S. Federal Reserve note they're not exempt from this. You can't force majeure clause your way out of a broken money.
Another gentleman here on the second row in the hat.
I know why they're asking that question. There's a huge Instagram thing going on now. And my wife asked me the same question. Do you think about the Roman Empire? I was like, why are you asking? Of course I do. Like, who doesn't? I've always wanted to be a gladiator. Yes, absolutely. Who's next?
This gentleman in the cap right here in the second. Or anyone else? Somebody raise their hand. Pick one.
I got one.
Okay.
Hello. I have a question. What do you think about the 11 states so far that accept gold and silver coins as legal tender? And the second part of the question is do you see this as a movement in the right direction?
Hi, what's your name? Hi, Chris. Thank you for being here and thank you for your question. So we've worked on several pieces of legislation to do just that, to reestablish or reaffirm gold and silver as legal tender in that state. As far as policy goes, it is mostly a symbolic win, admittedly. You're reaffirming the Constitution, and that's great. In some cases, you have contractual protection. So for example, sorry, this is going to be very niche. for example, in a gold clause contract, if you and I wrote a 30-year contract that was denominated in gold or silver, and gold and silver are a legal tender, then a judge and you and I had a conflict, then a judge could say, okay, you need to pay the contract that was denominated in gold and silver. And if gold and silver are a legal tender, then you would be able to do that. Otherwise, a judge might say, okay, you are contractually obligated to fulfill this contract, but you can do it in a USD substitute. But the truth is that the US dollar is not a reasonable facsimile. It's not a one-on-one substitute for gold or silver. And so it's very important, I think. And we're passing these laws, I'm happy to say, in Missouri, in South Carolina, in Iowa, in, I believe, Florida. In several of these states, we are introducing legislation to do just that. But I think there are taxes and regulations that are more, as far as the practical use of gold and silver as money, passing legislation like that is more important than passing symbolic legislation to reaffirm gold and silver, according to Article 1, Section 10 of the U.S. Constitution, as money, to me.
Yeah, and I think in Florida, Governor DeSantis, I think during the debates, and I think on with Tucker on an interview, Tucker Carlson said he's not in favor of CBDCs, which is the federal government's answer to money. They know the money's dying. That's why CBDCs are out. If you look at the Atlantic Council, they're tracking something like 130 instances of CBDCs across the world. The whole world knows what's coming to the dollar. I mean, we already know. But Governor DeSantis' office is basically like, yeah, we like this legislation because this gives an alternative that Florida residents can use outside of CBDCs. And that's very important. But it's very important that we do as much as we can. We get it across the United States as much as we can. So one of the things that we're working on is working with his organization and other people that have experience in different states and doing omnibus legislation so that we can roll it out to more than one state at a time. And that actually, it's interesting, you know, different states have different congressional processes, so you have to work within those processes. So that's been an interesting lesson for me, you know, in trying to do something like this in more than one state.
Do you want to take another?
No, go ahead, wrap it
Okay.
up. We got one more going, and we're good.
Okay.
One more what?
Yeah, take a second. Have another question.
One more question.
Yeah.
This lady right here in the third or fourth row back.
Oh, wait, hang on. You just asked, or you brought up asset-backed digital currencies and Governor DeSantis and everything that's going on with that. I will say we've introduced federal legislation. We're working with Congressman Mooney out of West Virginia we recently introduced the anti-CBDC bill, which completely disallows Congress to establish a CBDC, a U.S. CBDC. It does not allow the Federal Reserve or the Treasury to establish a U.S.-based CBDC without explicit permission from Congress. And that's what we're doing here, right? Because we understand the importance of privacy and money. We understand how quickly that can devolve into an Orwellian society. And so we've introduced that legislation with Congressman Mooney and hoping to get a hearing from that here soon.
So I have a question back here that this one actually piqued my interest. So I'm going to let you ask it. Let me borrow these for a sec. Go ahead and ask the question.
Hey, keep them away from your pockets now. These are about the Goldbacks. Hi, my name is Ben.
How you doing, Ben?
I'm invested in silver, gold, and crypto for a couple of years now. And I recently put a few thousand into Goldbacks. And right now they just released, I believe, maybe 2 weeks ago, South Dakota. So it's up to 5 states right now. This is actual, what I believe money should be. It's money made of gold. And it's the same size of our dollars. Different denominations are a little bigger, a little thicker. The 50s don't really fit in my wallet because they're too fat, but I brought it to show everybody and to promote them, because I always had a vision in my mind that if cash is Federal Reserve notes, it's just paper. And I always thought, why can't we just use like a paper? And then someone invented it, and they're from Utah. And someone asked them a question, why don't you do Texas next? They said, we can't handle the volume. So they have one machine, I believe, it's a little over $1 million. So if they get it, they're talking with other people to get another machine, and hopefully, my question is, do you think they'll have at least half of the United States in 2 years? All the states doing it, half the states doing it?
We hope so. I think that there is support. By the way, there's 2 companies that do this. There's Goldback and then there's Valarum. And Valorum not only does it in the United States, they do it for other countries. Other countries are getting involved in Goldback notes. So basically what a Goldback is they spray gold in like micro droplet form onto the bills, and it stays on the bill. You can take it back off. There's a process for it, but there's gold within the bill. So you're actually passing a certain amount of gold. Literal gold. It's literal gold in the bill. It's really cool. So in any case, yeah, we're hoping to get as many states as possible. And what we're finding is as soon as we introduce the concept of sound money, that senators and congressmen are saying, oh, we need that. They're waiting for someone to come to them for an answer. So one thing I would ask that you guys do to help us out is to precondition your state legislatures. Start writing them. They listen. Start emailing them. But the thing that's most important that I'm learning, if you actually go there and talk to them, you're equivalent to like 5,000 people within the state. So each one of you has the power of 5,000 people if you can actually have a physical conversation with someone. And it really does help because there's only, maybe 10 or 20 of us working on, on this initiative, maybe a little bit more. We really could use the help.
And so, last note just on that. And this is so important. I've been working, so I've been doing this now for 8 years. We're doing state legislation, federal legislation. On more than one hand, it would take for me to count the amount of times a senator has gone on the Senate floor in a certain state or a rep has gone on the floor, in the House floor in a certain state and said, holy shit, I had no idea gold and silver were this popular. This is the most popular bill of the session. I have been hearing from people, phone calls, emails, people are showing up at my office talking about gold and silver. The grassroots pressure is what makes this possible. Me standing up on a stage, Rob standing, as much reach as you have, this is not what makes policy happen. It's the grassroots pressure, the emails, and in large part because state legislatures are not conditioned. They don't really know organized pressure. So when they feel it, when a couple 100,000 people are reaching out to them, they realize, wait, hang on, this is something we need to pay attention to. And so the grassroots pressure, more than anything else, is what makes these legislative projects possible. We've heard it time and time again, and ultimately it's y'all. It's the people in the state reaching out to the state legislators telling them, we need something better than this.
If they hear from as few as 100 people, a lot of times that will cause them to pursue legislation.
Absolutely, absolutely.
It just takes 100 in a state, and that will make a difference. All right. Thank you, guys. Appreciate you.
Thank you, guys. Appreciate you.